Welcome everyone, KD here with another Unreal Engine 4 tutorial. This tutorial series will be about blueprint classes and how to communicate between different blueprints. I do this because someone asked me how to start with Unreal Engine 4 and visual coding. So if there is some kind of tutorial to really get into visual coding and blueprints, how it works. And I just remembered for myself I had to find information. All the information were kind of a little bit scattered and I had to put them together. So I thought about myself what would be the most useful thing would have been the most useful thing for me when I started, and I hope this will be a tutorial really for beginners to have a point where they can start. Absolutely, with visual coding, blueprints of course is the most important thing to understand the blueprint classes and what tasks you can do in these different blueprints. I think it's the most useful thing if for beginners if you want to start. So what do I want to do in this tutorial series is I'm going to show you the main blueprint classes I personally use. Depending on how far I want to go with this series, I will show you also other blueprints classes, but I want to focus first on the ones you really need to know and you will use often. I will show you what different tasks you can do in these different blueprint classes. So now you have to know that you can do tasks in different blueprint classes. I mean the same task you can do in different blueprint classes, and it's probably personal preference in which one you want to do which task. I can only show you here what I prefer to do, and maybe someone else prefers to do it differently than I do and do the task in another blueprint, just so you know. And then the third thing, like I said, is how to communicate between the different blueprint classes or just different blueprints. What is very important. And then there is a fourth part I can't teach you in this tutorial section just because it would expand the tutorial in forever, and that's all the commands or functions you have in here to teach you what they do and so on, and what are their names and what do they do. The reason why I can do this in this tutorial is, like I said, it would expand the tutorial way too long. It would be too much information. Some commands or functions can only be called in the combination with another task, with another specific command or anything like that. And so it's very difficult to even put a tutorial about this stuff here together. And the other problem is, even if I tell you this, you probably won't learn much about it. It's much more useful if you use this command and functions and you kind of learn for yourself how they work for different tasks. And that's the reason why I will keep it with the basics, with how do blueprints work, how can you communicate between these blueprints, and for what tasks are these different blueprints. If there are questions, please leave them in the comment section. I will try to answer everything, so in the hope that you will understand how everything works. So in the first part of this tutorial series, I want to talk about level blueprints, and with that I want also to introduce you the layout of blueprints, or namely the event graph of blueprints, and all blueprint classes will have other graphs and things like that, so I will explain them in other parts, but right now we want to focus on the level blueprint. So first thing first, important is you don't have to create the level blueprint. If you create a level, a map, then it will create for you a level blueprint. How can you find this level blueprint? First you have to open the map. So we are already in the map. You want to change the blueprint in. Then on top here in the top list you will find under blueprints. If you go down, open level blueprint and then we get in here. So in the middle we have the event graph. Here is where we do our work, our visual scripting, where we do our different tasks. What are mainly different tasks? Different tasks are, as example, a chain of different events. We will go to what are events a little bit later. We do mathematical problems, or we do logical. We bring solutions to logical problems. What is a logical problem? A very simple one is, as example, you have a door in your map, and there is a button. Now the input question is kind of like, did the player press the button, yes or no? And the output would be, is the door open, yes or no? So for the input is, did the player press the button? The answer is no. Then the result or output will be, the door is closed. Did the player press the button? Yes. Then the output would be, the door is open. This is a very simple logical problem. You will have a lot of this you want to solve in your blueprints. Now on the left side you will find here on the top first the graphs. In the graphs you will find all the events that you have created in your blueprints and so on. So right now maybe we go to events. There are, in the level blueprint, there are 3 events I mainly use. There are of course more events you can create, but I use mainly 3 events. First one is event begin play. That's when we first start the map. Everything we want to solve at the beginning, when we really load the map in, should be solved before we even start to play. That's everything that is in event begin play. What are these for tasks we want to solve in here? As example, and maybe the most important thing is, we want to load every saved data we have, maybe from a previous map or anything like that. Maybe you have for your character customization options, so we can set here, as example, we can here reset the outfit of your characters and other things like that. We want to do everything here, everything like I said, or loading in enemies and stuff like that, or cutscenes and so on. So there are many things we kind of want to do. If we start with a cutscene and not with gameplay, then we also have to set this here. Then we have event tick. Event tick is a little bit different. This is a loop event. That means every time the event starts, it does every task we put in here, and as soon as we did every task, it will just start again. So you have to be very careful with the event tick. I don't add too much stuff into the event tick. simply because it can be very dangerous if you can very easily create infinite loops that will break the game. Also, it can be very heavy on the performance if you do too much here. But there are things that we have to solve here. Like the example, so everything that is kind of dynamic. So what we can do is kind of spawn in things, because when we do that, then it spawn. If we do want to spawn in one enemy here, then we do spawn it in, spawn an enemy in, again every time when we do the loop. So this is maybe something you want to do in the begin play. If there is kind of if there is a certain amount of enemies you want to spawn in, and to a later time, maybe if you first you have 3 enemies, if you kill all 3 enemies you want to load in 5 new enemies, something like that, then you have to do it in the event tick. But you have to know that you can that there has to be a logical problem you have to solve before, like I said before, with the door and the switch. Otherwise, you will load in more and more enemies, and it will never end. It's just something you have to know and to be careful with the event tick. So I'm sorry that this was maybe a little bit a long explanation, but this is important that you know. This is a loop, and you can really damage your game if you do too much task or the wrong task in there. The first one I use is custom events. I use this a lot. So I mean there are other event types, but in general you can solve all these other event types with custom events. And then you can do here a task, and as example you can then bring here into your event begin play, you can bring in your event you just created. For what can you use that? If you kind of need this event on different places, if you need the same event on different places, you can create an event like this. Or if your chain of tasks is just so long that it's difficult to find the singular tasks, then it's maybe good to separate important stuff and do it with a custom event. I like to do this a lot, to kind of have things separated and don't have. My preference is I don't like to have these very extreme long chains with all these tasks. Also because it gets then really hard to find stuff, and you can find your events here on the left side very easily, and if you label them correctly, you will find your tasks, your events very fast. So let's go further. We can also add in here functions. Functions are mathematical problems. Like I said, most of the time I solve them directly in the task. You don't have to create a function for this. So I mean, let's create a function. So we get here a new function. We can set here inputs and outputs and so on, and then we do solve our mathematical problems. But it can also be a logical problem. You want to solve here in this function. You can do this here. This is again if you don't want to have long chains of mathematical and logical problems. You can create this function and then just load in this function, and then maybe you have here a very complicated function, and if you want to change something here, you can again go in the left side to the function, directly to the function, and solve it there instead to have to find where did I put this in the whole event graph. I mean, now that it's simple, we have a very simple overview, but as more tasks we add, as more complicated it is, and you want to find your stuff fast. Another reason why you should want to use function is if you have a problem, like again mathematical or logical, that repeats itself a lot in different tasks. Then you may want to do a function because you save a lot of time, because you don't have to repeat it over and over and over again. Then we have here macros, and to be honest, I'm not really using macros. I'm not really sure for what exactly you can use it. Like I said, up to this point I never had to use a macro. So honestly, I never bothered to learn. Maybe someone knows a great use for macros, but I'm not the person you have to ask if you want about macros. I seriously never use them, and I'm sure there is a reason why you can do this. Then probably the most important part, you can also create variables here. Variables are kind of, like I said, for these logical problems or also for mathematical problems necessary to solve them. There are the input and there are the output, or the state of the output and the state of the input. We have here different variables. This here is red, is a boolean. Boolean is a simple true or false question. We have compile this. So default value now is not selected, that means it's false. If we select it, it's true. So we can just push this variables we have created in. We can get the variable or set the variable, so we can change it. And as I said, like right now, this is to solve a logical problem, is the button pressed or no, and then we can do, as example, a branch. Like I said, I won't go into details of all these commands, just here to have a very simple something very simple to show you. Example, that was the word I was looking for. So as example, we start here the event. When we check this event, is the button switched? That's maybe something you want to do in the loop, so it will check this event the whole time, kinda. I mean in the event tick, so it checks this event the whole time. So as example, if you haven't pressed the button, then the door is closed, and as soon as you press the button, the loop will see, oh yes, the door is open now, and then you can go through the door, maybe to another map or somewhere else. And you see a branch, then it makes from one event line, it branches out into two. And with the boolean, we just say, yeah, is it true or false? Then we have as other examples, so bytes, I again don't use that much. Maybe there is a use. You will find a use for that. What I use often is integer. This is then more for mathematical problems. As example, to keep this here with the door open, maybe instead of a switch, we have enemies. And we say now, if we kill more than 10 enemies, then the door will open. You see now, with the help of this command here, we create out of a mathematical problem a logical problem. So we have again a true or a false output here. If we keep our mouse over this command, we see the meaning of it. returns true if A is greater than or equal to B. So if this number here is 11 as example, then the door will open up. And this here is, as example, counts the enemies you kill. Then we have a float. This is also a number, but integer are full numbers, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, minus 5, things like that, and floats are not full number. I mean, they can also be full numbers, but they are also behind the point, so 0.1, 0.12, and things like that. Yes, so this is maybe if you want to solve a different problem, if you want to have a percentage of something or things like that, then you may want to use a float, or if you just don't get full numbers. The other ones, I just want to go a little bit through name and text. I never understood what is the big difference. I mostly use the text, but it may depend on the command or the function you use. You may need a name, but most of the time I use a text. String, the command I know you use a string is for saving and loading from a save file and from a specific slot name, then you use a string. That's the one I know. Then we have vector. That's maybe a little bit special one we want to show. When we look at vector, this is not only one number, these are three number, x, y, and z. We can use this as example for location if you want to spawn in an enemy on a specific location you want to use as example vector. Rotator is is the same, more or less the same, but this is just telling us the rotation. It tells us the rotation in x, y, and z. So if is it 90 degrees, is this object 90 degrees on the z axis or x axis or anything like that turned. And finally, transform is then the size, also in x, y, and z. So normal size is 1, 1, 1, and you can make it smaller by, like as example, 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, or making it bigger, double it to 2. This is just to change the size of an object or anything like that. For that's for transform. It looks similar like this. Then structures I don't use too much. To be honest, what interface also I'm not using too much. The other thing you may use is object type as example for say for a save file. You want to have object reference, or if you have an object in your map, you want to change something, as example the location in it, then you can create a reference to this object. However, if it's in the map, it's even simpler to create an object like this. Or you can also do class references, like to another actor reference, but again I will show you how you can do it simpler. So this one I will show you in a different part, but maybe the object reference I can show you in here. So if we go here in our map, we can here add some different assets. As example, we can just add a cube here. So now it wants to update the lightning, but if we select now the cube in here and we go back to our level blueprint, and this works only in the level blueprint, and you can only select a reference from this particular map. You can't select something from another map in this level blueprint. But if you go now to the right mouse, then you see here you can create a reference to cube, and then you can change here as example the transformation of the cube and other things like that. So that's easier to get in an object reference, but you can also do it this way and get here object reference. We can here get an actor as example, animations if you need a reference here, camera actors and so on, and maybe somewhere can I press cube texture scene capture texture render target. No, there's no direct thing to cube, so I don't even really know right now how you want to do this. So on the right side you see the details of these variables. You can change here the name. You want to label your variables in detail, or I mean, so you exactly know what you want, what this variable does. What you can do here is change the variable as example to an array. What is an array? An array is, instead of one variable, you can set different variables, and can then get these singular variables with a example an integer variable that then tells you I want, in this case I want to take 0, in this case I want to take 1 out of this array of variables. So what you have to know about this is you can set in one array only the same variable types. That's one thing you have to know. And there are people, they really love to use variables instead of that really love to use arrays instead of variables. I think again this is probably more preference. I'm not there are cases it's really useful to use them, but I think you're much more flexible if you use singular variables mostly, and and many times you don't save too much time with it, but it's really useful if you have really like 10 different variables that you never want to call on the same time, but are kind of referenced differently. Maybe for let's say you have 10 different enemy types, and every of these 10 different enemy types has different amount of hit points, and so you can create an array with this different hit points in it. Let's say 100, 120, 80, 70, 200, whatever, and then you can set, yeah, this is enemy type number 0 with 100 hit points. This is enemy type number 1 with 50 hit points. In this case it's very useful, but that's something you have to know to kind of know on your own what prefer you more. Like I said, I prefer most of the time I prefer more to use variables than arrays. I think the arrays are useful if you want a dynamic output, but your input stays always the same. While variables is very useful if the output always if the input always changes. So as can I explain this in very short terms with a good example? It's maybe difficult. Let's just say you maybe test out variables and arrays for your own, and then you will see when it's very useful. But as example, absolutely something you want to save and something that changes all the time. Maybe armor count or something like that changes all the time. I would use their single variable because you want to change it all the time. If you want to, I mean, you can also set these variables, but then it gets really, then it starts to get complicated and takes a lot of time. So you can set this and kind of get, sorry, not get the variable, but make array, sorry. And then you can set the inputs in here. But if you have to do this all the time and you have like more than 3 numbers, maybe 5, 10, maybe even 100 numbers, it gets very annoying. But like I said, I maybe talked a little bit too much about arrays and variables. That's something you have to find out for yourself. What do you like to use more, and so on. So I hope this is clear. And then event dispatcher again is something I never used, and I can't tell you exactly for what you wanna use this. So let's go now to the level blueprint to finish this first part. This was definitely a little bit longer than I intended to do. I really wanted to keep it on the basics, but kind of really to show you the different parts or so on. Of a blueprint, I kind of had to use more time. So what tasks do you want to use mainly in the level blueprint? And that is generally everything that is connected to this map, and only connected to this map. Things that you want to use, that you need to use in different maps. As example, a high score. You generally don't want to solve this task directly in here. You may want to do a separate blueprint for this task. But like I said, as example, for sure you want to load your saved game file at the beginning in here. Maybe if you want to spawn in stuff like enemies and things like that, you definitely want to solve this in here. What you also do in here is, like I said, you may want to do tasks, different tasks like setting the outfit of your character, setting the skin for your character, things like I said before, high score, how much the high score is, and other things. Maybe you have a timer or anything like that. You want to solve this in a different task, but however at the beginning of the map you want to start them from here, from this level blueprint. So kind of this is kind of the core blueprint for this specific map where you get the different tasks from different blueprints. Also loading you will do in a different blueprint. I will show you that later, and you will get the task from this different blueprint in here. That's kind of what you want to do in here, but you also kind of maybe want to do different things, like if you want to save the location of your player character for different reasons. As example, if you die, you will respawn on the same place or anything like that. Then you may want to do this in here but in the event tick and not in the event begin. So like I said, in the event begin, you kind of get all the tasks you want to solve before you start playing. Like I said, loading the game, setting different values for your player character, like what skin he uses, what customization options he uses, and so on. What weapon has he drawn, how much ammunition he has, and things like that. You want to do into the start, but you want to get this from another blueprint. That's kind of what you do with a level blueprint. I will show you a little bit more examples, but when I go more to about how to communicate between the different blueprints, I will show you some examples what I mean with that. Maybe this is now a little bit unclear, but I kind of hope you learned something from this first part. Like I said, this was a little bit the overview and the level blueprint, what we really do in here. This may get clearer with the next parts I will do. So if you have questions, that you probably have, leave them in the comments. I hope with the next parts most of the questions will be solved, but I will try to answer all the questions you leave in the comments. Thank you for watching, and seeing you in part